Hello, welcome to Getting It Right Again. This is your host, Dr. Ramsaran, and reminding you that this is a PPP program which puts our perspective to things and at the same time allow you to interact with leaders of the party from time to time. As you've seen on the screen, we have one of those leaders of the PPP Civic, Ms. Manu Chan, legal practitioner, lawyer by profession, mom by, that's a profession mom.
That's a whole profession by itself, yes.
And she's been around, despite her young looks, she is not flattering. She's been around for quite a number of years in the movement. She was in Parliament before and she's in Parliament again. So welcome, Priya.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Bheri.
The burning topic now at this time of a program that Getting It Right, it concerns the CCJ, its interventions, would there be more interventions, and the reaction of the PNC AFC government to that. So, and we're blessed that you also have some legal background, and you can probably give us, in a layman's point of view, the bullet points, which I notice are well laid out in your weekend meal. Remember, I'm trying to get you to look at this paper. So it's very well laid out, and you can probably have to walk us through the present situation, concerns that I know other guys are asking me about, but speak to them now.
Right. So let's just back up a little bit and take you through point form, where we are, and then you have an opportunity to ask us questions too. So if you want to direct our minds to anything particularly, then we can go deeper into that. But we have a constitution that was amended in around 2000 by a majority, by consensus. All the political parties, all the people of Guyana supported that constitution. The PNC, PPP, WPA, everybody who existed at the time, including civil society, the private sector, the bar association, religious bodies. They all went across this country, listened to what people wanted, came up with a constitution. In that constitution, it allows for a no confidence motion to be passed against the sitting government. In 2014, the Prime Minister, Moses Nagamoto, at that time he was not Prime Minister, he was a member of Parliament, seconded by Cathy Hughes. You recall, she's going to become more relevant just now, and I'll tell you why. They brought a no confidence motion against the PPP government, as a result of which essentially the government fell before its term, because what happened is, in an effort to give the parties time to talk and so on, President Ramsaran had prorogued the National Assembly and called elections. So we didn't actually go to the vote in those circumstances. In 2018, the PPP Civic, now in opposition, had brought a no confidence motion against the government of Guyana, the APNU AFC government. That wasn't because the PPP woke up one day and decided we want to bring a no confidence motion. That was because for 3 years these people had done nothing. They had fulfilled no promises. They were looking after themselves and their cronies, paying themselves fancy salaries, giving them and their children scholarships, renting big fancy houses, and none of the promises they made were being fulfilled. As a result of which, in 2 successive local government elections, the people of Guyana chased them out. The people of Guyana, essentially with their vote, sent them packing. And throughout those periods when we were campaigning, people would say to us, you got to do something to get rid of these guys. We can't handle this anymore. Our businesses are falling. We got to leave pumpkin in the field. We got to leave shallot in the field because we cannot even sell it. It's more expensive for us to reap it and sell it. The sugar workers had been fired en masse. Rice was told in no uncertain terms by no lesser person than the president, you gotta look after yourself. We don't sell rice. And teachers were marching on the streets, had to beat a pressure pot and sing and dance and threaten before they could get benefits that they had become accustomed to for 10 years prior. And everything was falling apart. So we brought that motion, and on the night of December 21st, as you would recall, the now historic night, one of the government members, Charan Das Prasad, voted in favor of that motion. In other words, he said that his government was useless and they needed to be shied out. They needed to come out of place. In his words, his post interviews, he said the reason he did that was exactly what I just said. He went himself and persuaded people to vote for the APNU, but particularly against the PPP Civic, because in those communities, Kanji and Blairmont and those places, people were almost 100% PPP. He said he spent a lot of his energy, his time, his money convincing people that this was the better option. And then he went in, and what he saw was the opposite. These people were neglected, they were denied any services, their children couldn't go to school, their fathers in the homes were fired, people were contemplating suicide, and they were coming to his house
In other words,
every night to find out why this had happened.
Although he did not move the no confidence motion, it was for him, his mindset.
He said he knew he always,
Yes.
I've watched all his interviews, and he's quite an entertaining fellow. And I know him relatively well, because lawyers in Guyana, everybody knows everybody. But what he said was he knew he had one chance at this. And so he had a long talk with himself. He had sleepless nights, and he said, you know, his conscience wouldn't let him do anything else. This is his words. I don't want to speak for him. I'm just telling you what I've seen in interviews. I have never spoken to Charnas subsequent to the no confidence motion in any form, written, word, whatever. And so this is why he said he voted against the government, because all the promises they had made were falling through the cracks, and that it's not even, I don't even think it was the promises that he was concerned about. He saw, you're living in a community, and he saw the suffering of the people. So the government fell on the 21st of December. Immediately upon that no confidence motion being passed, Moses Nagmotu sat with all his parliamentary colleagues around him, flanked by them all, and said, you know, Guyana, don't panic. This is what happens in a constitution. We have fallen. We will go to the election. This is what happens in politics. Don't worry about it. We'll win, whatever. 2 days later, Granger stood up as president of this country and said, there is no need for alarm. There's no need for chaos. Calm down. We're going to an election. We will do as we are constitutionally mandated to do. And that's what we'll do. Then, all of a sudden, we had somebody one Sunday, shortly after this no confidence motion, got up, put on his suit and his tie and a kerchief in his pocket, quite like the usual characteristic con that you would see in movies, and sat in front of a press press corps and told the people there that in a 65-member house, it was what was needed was 34 votes, not 33. It was a very ridiculous argument, but he said it with a straight face. Now, this is Nigel Hughes I'm speaking about. Nigel Hughes is the husband of Kathy Hughes, who had seconded the no confidence motion in 2014 that I was telling you about earlier, when they had the same number of seats. They had 33, so they knew all the time that 33 was a majority. He is also, at that time in 2014, he was chairman of the AFC, the people who seconded this motion. So he knew fully well this had nowhere to go, but he sat down and he conned this entire nation. And the government, being the government, looking to either very gullible or stupid or looking for any excuse, grabbed onto that and ran to the court to say 33 is not a majority, 34 is a majority. First they went to the speaker, and the speaker said, no, not here, come out of place. I'm not going to rule on that. I've already ruled. And I think the speaker wanted to say, you know, y'all are trying to make people fools here, but I'm not going to get caught. The best place for you to go if you still have a concern is the court. So they went to the court. The Chief Justice knocked them down on every single point. That is the Chief Justice of Guyana and the High Court. Every single point. That 33 is a majority. The motion was properly passed. They went and said that he was a dual citizen. Now they appointed a dual citizen. And then we subsequently discovered they had 5 more dual citizens sitting in the House. And they wanted to say his vote on that night was not valid, but every other vote he took and all their other dual citizen colleagues took were valid. Stupid, ridiculous argument. It is as silly as it's sounding to you now, but they actually went and made these arguments. Then they went to the Court of Appeal, and the Court of Appeal somehow or the other found a way to say that the government had not fallen. And then they went to the CCJ. Now the CCJ has been very clear, succinctly clear. I don't think the people could get clearer than that. The judges said the 33 is a majority, that dual citizens should not sit there, but once they had sat and their sitting had not been challenged within 28 days, that any action they took thereafter was valid, their votes would be valid, and that the government had fallen on the 21st of December.
Right, fallen. That's the point I want to get over to the early public. fall what it means. You know,
It means the government had collapsed in as much as if the people of Guyana had voted against them.
in other words, as another part of the document says, the president and his cabinet has to resign.
Well, it went further. They are now resigned automatically, and they would be in office for 3 months, 90 days thereafter, only for the purpose of holding an election and making sure, I mean, no country could go without a government, so they'll stay in office more as a caretaker kind of government. In case somebody's trying to breach our border, there's a government there. If somebody's calling to say happy independence Guyana, there's somebody for them to call, you know, that kind of thing. But very, very caretaker capacity. No new policies, no new, decent people would understand that to mean no new contracts, no new implementation of party-specific policies, those kinds of things. So they were supposed to have had an election by March 21st of 2019. They didn't do that, and last time, the first time the Court of Appeal, the CCJ met to make consequential orders, we heard the most ridiculous excuses from all the government lawyers, and it's quite a shame, Bheri. We at some point we need to know what that cost this country. This ridiculous foray into finding out whether 33 bigger than 32. What did this cost this country? But we heard lawyers for the government saying things like, you know, the same one who had the wrong constitution or something when he was arguing the matter. Last week his excuse was they had 2 holidays in the week and they didn't get time, and they needed more time to talk. Because in all of this also, you may recall that we had challenged the unilateral appointment of the GCOM chair. In fact, I remember sitting at this same table in front of these same cameras on Diwali 2017, the night of Diwali, the darkest night in this country on 2017, protesting and complaining the earlier appointment of the GCOM chair. He had earlier in the day been hurriedly appointed unilaterally by the president. The CCJ also held that the president acted unconstitutionally. That man was badly appointed, and there was essentially no GCOM chair. So last week he kind of scurried along and left the office, and they thanked him for his service or whatever. But we now have no GCOM chair. We have them asking for more time. Barjag, the leader of the opposition, specifically wrote the president on that night and said, that same day I think the letter went off, and he said, look, Mr. President, I am ready and willing to meet you every single day if necessary, so that we could have consensus around this GCOM chair as the Constitution and the Carter formula wanted us to do. That has been in excess of 6 days now. I don't think we've heard from the president yet, or his people, about whether they want to meet. Now, bear in mind, these are the same people who went to the court of the CCJ and said, we didn't get time to talk, they had a holiday in the week, which is just bizarre, but that's what they said. And then we want time to talk. And now the CCJ said, I don't see how the judges could have said anything else, especially when they're asking for the political leaders to behave in a sensible, responsible, mature manner. Our leader of the opposition, the PPP's standard bearer Barjag, wrote and said, I am willing to meet you on behalf of the PPP every single day, at any time you want, wherever you want, so that we could give effect to this judgment and to the constitutional provisions. And they who asked for more time have done nothing in the meanwhile.
But in the meantime, and that's the point you were bringing out a few seconds ago, they continue to do certain things that would cost the Guyanese budgets.
But I don't want to even talk about the budget, because I know you said we have a truncated program. On my way to this building just now, I heard an ad saying something about going to house registration, and if you don't go, you'll be charged or something. So now they're threatening people. I went through that little history just now to say to you that at no point what the government is doing now, every step of the way, it has been a desperate cling to power. Here's a government who has fallen, and instead of saying, you know what, we're very confident we did good for the people of this country, that they know that they know the other side is not an option, and so we're going to go to the election and we're going to let the people speak. That's essentially what is required of democratic, loving, people who ascribe to democratic norms, people who believe that laws are supposed to be followed. That's what we would expect of our president and of our government. Clearly, that is not the kind of people we're dealing with, because on the night of the 21st of December, first of all, going into local government elections, nobody said anything about the list. On the night of the 21st, nobody said, we have fallen and we're going to an election. But let me just say, a concern we have is the list needs to be updated. Nobody said anything like that. And we need to go to house registration. President Granger spoke a few days later. He didn't say we are going to the election, but let me just say, Guyanese, we need to hurry up this house-to-house registration business, because it's a concern that citizens have raised with us. Nobody said anything like that. When they realized that their arguments in the court were sounding very, very hollow, very stupid, when the nation was making memes and laughing at them and so on, they realized, this probably wouldn't pan out. Then they started talking about the list isn't good. And this same badly appointed chairman that people said ab initio, you know what I mean? From the beginning, from the moment he was appointed, it was null and void. It was badly done, so there was no chairman who was masquerading there, making, writing letters to the press arrogantly and so on. There was no chairman there. But I'm saying there was no claim that house-to-house registration was needed. Now that they've lost in the court and they are being told that you have to go to an election, they're going to the court to say, we're not going to be ready for an election until December 25th. First they had said November, because we need house-to-house registration to make sure that people on the list are removed from the list, and to make sure our young people who we love so much but who we didn't serve for the last 4 years, who we couldn't find places to put, who we couldn't deliver services to, we love them so much, we want them to get on the list. And that is the most fallacious, dishonest, deceptive argument out there. Now, I think most people know it's not true, but let's just go through the history of that a little bit. When the Constitution changed and certain laws changed along with it to accommodate what would be our new process for elections. And let me remind you why we had to get a change. We had to get a change because this country was accustomed to rigged elections by the PNC. That is the People's National Congress, which is the majority party in the APNU-AFC. What had happened is we had spent 20-something years getting rigged elections. What rigged elections mean is that people's will and desire were not reflected in the outcome. When you went to the poll, I remember places like Maikoni. Maikoni votes 100% for the PPP. But when the results came back, you'd get like 200% of the votes for PNC. What that means is that more people who live there were voting and all went to the PNC. My poor grandfather, who would go barefoot every time to poll, faithfully to the polling place and vote for the PNC. So he knows, this is what he told me, that I don't know what my neighbor's doing, but I can tell you I know how I voted. I would see 100% come back for the PNC, and I know my vote wasn't reflected there. This is the most, this is one of human beings innate right to choose their government, and then the majority will win. That's what we know. They took that away from people. They stole it. They robbed people of that right, and that's how we had these changes and so on. In 2005, Corbyn, then leader of the opposition, I believe, and Mr. Jagdev agreed to continuous registration. Continuous registration means that we not wait till the election come around. As people come of age, as people change their names, as people move out from one place to another, they could go into GCOM and they can get this done. Every 6 months, there would be a continuous registration cycle, period, for 6 months. And what would happen, so you would have 2 every year. What would happen would be, if I got married and my name changed and I wanted that reflected in my ID card, I could go change it during this period. If my child became 14 years old, not 18, 14 years old, because that's when you can get a ID card. You could go and get registered, and when elections come around and you're 18, you will automatically go on the list. If you moved from Port Morant to Parfait Harmony, because you have a job in Georgetown, and as you know, Bheri, the PPP government has created numerous housing schemes where we have thousands of movement going on because people are now owning, were owning their own homes. This government has collapsed that program completely. So we have entirely new places that didn't have, was bush before. Diamond, Parfait Harmony, Tushin, Hope, Nom Pearl. These are just like, I'm giving you small names. Bath on the northern side. All these places, yes, all these places, Linden, a whole set of places, are new housing schemes where new people are living, might not have been registered before. You get a chance to do it. So, like I said, the parties agreed and laws were amended to cater for continuous registration so that people could continue being registered throughout the period. In any event, once an election is called,
18-year-olds, I think that was causing.
We'll go through each just now. But when every election was called from the last house-to-house we had was for the 2006 election, I believe. When you checked, 2011 was, the list was based on continuous registration. 2015, the list was based on continuous registration. Nobody called for house-to-house then. And that's because it wasn't necessary. Now let's go through what happens. When an election date is announced, GCOM then announces a claims and objection period. It could be 2 weeks, it could be a month, it could be however long is needed. And in that claims and objections period, what you have is someone who became 18 and is ready to vote, they could go get registered. Somebody who moved from living in Georgetown to say Tushin because they have a job at Parika or they got married over there could change their address, and instead of having to come back to Georgetown on voting day, they could vote in Tushin. Someone who had a name change, like a woman who got married, changed her name she wants, and it's reflected on her ID card, but she never got it changed on the list. That could happen in the claims and objection period. If people died during that period, either the Guyana GPO, Guyana Registrar's Office, the GRO, Guyana Registrar's Office, General Registrar's Office, could send or ought to be sending on a regular basis all the people who have died so that they could come off the list. Or a family member could take in a death certificate and say, this person has died, here is a death certificate issued by the relevant authority of the state, could you take this person off the list?
Even if
all of these things can happen.
The GRO thing, it's a continuous process that makes things life easy for GCOM.
Right, so and that's what it was intended to do. In any event, so what is the complaint right now? The complaint is that people who are of age wouldn't be able to vote. But let's take that, let's break it down. In the last cycle, which ended on the 15th of April last year, if you were 14 years old and you were going to be 14, not on the 15th of April, but on the 31st of October in 2018, you would have been registered in last year. Somebody who was 14 last year, even if an election is called today, cannot vote today. Do you understand? Between 2015 and now, we've had 3 cycles of those. So let's say someone registered in 2015 who was 14 years old then. They might be able to vote now. So they'll go automatically on the list. Because remember, you're registering from the time you're 14, not 18. But even assuming you didn't bother to get registered, you didn't realize the importance of it. Now that an election is called and you are 18, because in 2015 someone who was 14 could well be 18 now. And you're 18 in this period, then what you have is you can go in the claims and objection period and get registered. So nobody is going to be denied their opportunity to vote. Why would we as a political party do that when we too will have people who want to vote for us more rather than less these days, considering what they've seen? The beauty about the government being in office and the PPP being out is that people get to compare now. They get to compare. Where did I receive more, better, more compassionate, more reliable service? Where did I receive that? under whom did I receive that? And they get to make that decision. And I believe, Bheri, I see your time is coming to an end, but I believe that that is really the fear
So you've laid to rest the issue with the 18-year-olds or people who are coming from teenagers who graduate to become adults. So that was very, very clear. It was one of the frequently raised questions outside here, because we got to recognize your explanation makes it look nice and simple, but the younger people out there, some of them are timid, some of them are honest.
But
the PNC has found out that they're using the state media.
So I'm just saying to our young people, I don't care who you're voting for, that is your right, and I will support it to the end of my life, whoever you vote for. I believe if I can't make you vote for me, that it's my failing. I don't think it's yours. I think I failed to convince you that I'm better. So I don't care who you're voting for. I do care very strongly that you have an opportunity to vote, and I'm promising you that in the claims and objection period, you will get that opportunity. Nobody's going to be able to take that away from you.
The council, the learned council of the commission herself advised,
and
she used the word, I think, review the list. We can bring in those people, because you already have all the 14-year-olds who would now be coming to be 18. They're already there.
And if they didn't get there, because there were some people in the registration period, oh, I'm 14, I don't need to register as yet. I'm saying if you're one of those people, you will still be registered in the claims and objection period, which has happened for every election from 2006 to now. Okay?
Okay, well, I'm sorry, Priya, we had been wonderful.
No,
but we have the program is truncated for certain reasons. There are some other things coming up, so you'll be back next week with the full program.
I could come back, yes, I'd be happy
good.
to.
And remember, at between 4 and 5 this afternoon, tune into 6 to 5 MTV. I'll be there again, and we'll be and hopefully Priya will be there discussing further. Bye bye from Getting It Right. See you next Saturday at noon.